Hi, I'm Gary Bembridge, and this is another of my tips for travelers. In this episode, I'm taking a look at the 10 best things to see and do if you're on an Adriatic and Greek islands cruise. It's a magnificent part of the world, and most of the cruises will start in either Venice or in Athens and travel between Athens and Venice. It means you take in parts of mainland Greece, the Greek islands, and a couple of stops on the Adriatic coast. And also, if you're looking at booking a cruise, these are the places that you need to make sure are on your itinerary to have the best way of seeing and doing this part of the world. Make sure you don't miss any of these incredible places. Let's start in Athens. So you're either going to embark or disembark in Athens. Make sure that you go to the Acropolis. This is an outcrop overlooking the city. On the top are the ruins of the most magnificent temples, the most famous of which being the Parthenon, which was a temple which was created and built in the honor of the goddess Athena, who's seen as the patron of Athens and really where they got their name from. Also nearby on the Acropolis is the New Acropolis Museum, a massive big complex with remarkable artifacts. If you're going on a cruise that starts or ends in Athens, make sure you build in time to go to the Acropolis. Since we've been talking about important archaeological areas, what I'm going to do is talk about some of the really other great and important archaeological sites to see. One of these is in Katakolon, and the place you go to is Olympia. It's about an hour or so from Katakolon. If you go on a cruise that's going to Katakolon, make sure you go to Olympia. Olympia is the site of the original Olympic Games, and many of the buildings were built in the honor of the god Zeus. And it is a huge sprawling complex, including the huge big stadium where many of the races were run. It's a fascinating complex, and there are two museums nearby. The one museum that I would really make sure you get to, which is not far from the entrance into Olympia, is the museum which tells you the whole history of Olympia. Make sure you go to Olympia. It is absolutely magnificent. Another great place to go if you are interested in culture and art is make sure that your cruise is stopping in Crete, and ideally calling it the port of Heraklion. It's the closest to what's known as the Palace of Knossos. Now, the Palace of Knossos is again another big sprawling complex. Some of it has actually been reconstructed, and it really was deserted at the end of the Bronze Age. It was the center of the Minoans, and it became very famous for a legend about the Minotaur, which allegedly lived in the labyrinth underneath the Palace of Knossos. But it's a beautiful place to visit, really interesting history and story. It's not known why it was deserted when it was such a major structure, but it's felt there's lots of volcanic activity and also lots of battles which probably drove the people out. So those are some really important historical sites if you're interested in that side of the Greek islands. My next two suggestions are around two really famous and iconic islands, the first of which is Santorini. Santorini is absolutely fascinating because it is created by lots of volcanic activity, and so you have these massive 300-meter high cliffs, and perched across the top of them are the towns. Now, when you actually call into Santorini, you are likely to be docked outside the main town, which is known as Fira, and you can then either walk up or get a donkey ride up, or you can wait for the cable car. And when lots of cruise ships in, it can be very busy. What I really recommend you do, though, is actually head to the other town, which is called Oia. Oia is a much more beautiful town. Very easy way of doing that. When you get onto the dockside, you'll find a number of boats there which will do a shuttle service. So they will take you from the dockside in Fira, about a 50-minute ride to Oia. They'll have a bus which takes you up the hill into Oia. Oia is where you're going to get those famous and classical sites of Santorini. If you want the classic pictures of Santorini, this is the place to go, Oia. From there, they normally include a bus which will take you back to the town of Fira, which you can then explore, get the cable car down, or walk down, or get a donkey ride down. We actually walk down, it's about 800 and something steps. It's not a bad walk down. The second really famous and iconic island is that of Mykonos and Mykonos town. One of the great things to do in Mykonos town is to stroll through the little winding streets. There's lots of really complex little winding streets, and it's full of little boutiques and shops and restaurants and bars, and it really is quite magnificent. Many people walk through the old town to head towards the windmills, which are the famous and iconic site and picture that everyone wants to get. Mykonos is really fascinating. In the 70s and 80s, it was a really important and vibrant place. It attracted lots of celebrities. It reportedly sort of really caught on because Onassis took Jackie there, and they really loved it there. and it also then became a big center for the gay culture and gay holidays. It sort of waned a little bit in the 90s and the early 2000s, but it's really come back, and it's again a very vibrant and trendy place to go. So Santorini and Mykonos are great places to go. They can be very, very busy if there's lots of cruise ships in. Now, two slightly more unusual islands that I really loved and I would recommend when you're looking at a cruise, try and make sure that these are included. The first of which is Patmos. Now, Patmos is a real quiet island, and you normally tender there, only the smaller ships come in, and you then head from Scala, which is a town on the bottom, you head up the hill to Hira. If you're really energetic and walk, I actually recommend it's much better to get a taxi up there because it's really steep. You can then go up to the monastery of St. John. Inside there they have some original scrolls from the Bible. It's also really well known for the cave of St. John, which is further down the hill, although a lot of people like to go there but are kind of disappointed when they go there. The cave is where John had the revelation and saw Jesus, and he wrote the book of Revelations, which is the last book in the New Testament. So it's a very popular place to come for pilgrimages. It's a very beautiful place, and the town is really lovely. The island of Patmos is a great one to include. Another island which is very fascinating is the island of Gythion. Gythion, again, the smaller ships tend to cruise there. They normally will tender you in, although sometimes one of the ships can dock. Gythion is a very beautiful town. They have lots of dockside and harbourside restaurants, fantastic bakeries, and it's a really great place to hang out. But the thing I recommend you do is head out to the Glyphada cave at Diros. It's about a 40-minute drive, so you may want to book an excursion through the cruise line. These caves are absolutely fascinating. They were only discovered in 1949, and they are vast underground caves. So you actually go on a little boat trip, which will take about half an hour, winding its way through the caves. It's quite an enclosed space, so if you're claustrophobic, not the best thing to do, but it is absolutely fascinating. Another great place to go to is Corfu. Corfu is much more of a land-based tourist island, but it's a great place to go. There's hop on hop off bus, and you can head out and explore the island, particularly head away from the old town, more towards the beach areas, and some great places where you can go swimming. So for example, we went swimming at the base of the old fortress with magnificent views, really quite something. If you are going on one of those sort of Eastern Mediterranean cruises, which either end or start in Venice, you will also call on a number of ports along the Adriatic coast, the two most famous of which are Kotor in Montenegro and Dubrovnik in Croatia. Kotor is a magnificent and beautiful place to call on. So when you're looking at itineraries, I really recommend you include one that has Kotor on. It's a bit like cruising into the Norwegian fjords. They have these beautiful mountains on either side, a beautiful bays. You sail quite a long way inland. And the old town of Kotor is very charming. It's quite small, it's a walled city, very easy to stroll around, lots of interesting shops. But one of the things I'd recommend you do if you've got a bit of energy and fitness is to climb up the massive mountain behind Kotor. It's over 1,000 steps, so you need to be relatively fit to head up there. But the views are absolutely magnificent looking back across the bay. Dubrovnik is, of course, a very famous city, and in some ways it's becoming almost over busy with tourists. Fans of Game of Thrones will know Dubrovnik as the early part of the series. Dubrovnik was used for part of Game of Thrones. The old walls city is very beautiful. You can walk right along the old walls, really magnificent. You can head up on the cable car and get great views of Dubrovnik. But strolling around the old town, particularly if you go on a walking tour and find out about all the different churches and the stories of Dubrovnik, absolutely fascinating. Of course, if you're starting or ending in Venice, make sure that you do spend time in Venice, and I have whole videos dedicated to finding out things about Venice. If you're heading on an Eastern Mediterranean cruise or a cruise that includes the Greek islands, these are the things and the islands and the places that I strongly recommend you do. When you look at an itinerary, make sure that all of or many of these places are included. A lot of the cruises will only call on the really big islands, so Mykonos or Santorini, and they will miss out some of the other islands which are much more fascinating. You won't get the true Greek experience. Hopefully you found that helpful. If you did, I also have a video full of tips and advice if you're looking or thinking of going on a Greek and Greek island cruise. I'd love it if you watch many more of my Tips for Travelers videos, and they will help you make much more of your very precious travel time and money.